Hey, everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it is time for
It's going to be a dry summer, unspun.
Ode to McLean K right here, our former editor-in-chief at the Orca. He loved it when you sang the intro. And then it's just become a thing. You sing now.
I know. And I'm sure he listens every week. Don't you, McLean? But
Of course he does.
Of course he does.
I
Keeps up
love
with
that.
all the news. How's it going?
Yeah. Good. How are you?
Good. So yes, drought. We're gonna have a lot of problems.
What are we like 63% of normal for the snowpack?
Friend just came through Merritt. You'd go up there all the time. There was no snow anywhere, nothing all winter.
That
Bad.
is so weird.
It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad.
So for people that are like, "Whoa, what's the big deal?" Like, can we put into context? And I don't mean to mock the people that say, "What's the big deal?" But they're like, "It's literally raining right now, George."
Yeah, we live in a rainforest.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just that rain doesn't accumulate enough in the reserves that we have, and not to mention underwater, the ground's water, all that stuff. It's just not enough. And then there's the fires, which is a problem. But I've talked about this in the past that we should be planning for the worst and looking at our reserves and building more of them and having them deeper and longer and looking at alternatives. It's sad state of the situation, but we got to deal with the fact that seems to be becoming the norm.
Yeah. And that's the part that gets me is, we have a little PTSD about atmospheric rivers as well as heat domes, right? As
Yep.
well as Arctic, what are those ones called when like the deep freeze that we had this year?
Right.
When it's minus 15 in Vancouver for a week. Like these are not normal things. And people are like, well, if you look back in history, it's like, okay, you know what? There are one-off events that have taken place over the years, but the trends are indisputable. The science behind what we're seeing is undeniable. And when there are extreme weather events, whether it's hot or cold or rainy, we're not capturing all of the moisture that came in an atmospheric river to use when we're dry as a bone for months at a time or have 2 weeks of 50 degrees and then thunder and lightning that rolls through when the weather changes. Like you said, I agree with you on this wholeheartedly that we need some forethought and some planning. And I know there are really good people hard at work trying to do this, but it's going to take the public, the taxpayer, us, to wrap our heads around what we need to do instead of arguing over carbon tax, Canada carbon rebate, like, you know what I mean? Like, I get the politics and the wedge issues and there's elections and everybody's heads get spun, which is why we started this podcast in the first place. And I think it's a very unspun thing to say is that within all the politics that's always going to be there, we should probably have some pragmatic planning and common sense going on here, which is something you've said from day one.
I think for water conservation, absolutely. And and we both grew up here, and I remember in the valley, we used to skate every winter. The fields would freeze over and we'd skate. It was kind of a normal thing. That happens very seldom. And so that's kind of one. I mean, this is not scientific, but having grown up here, you sort of see the differences. We used to have summers weren't as hot and winters weren't as cold, and they were sort of more consistent. And we didn't have the kind of rainstorms that we have now. So it's bad. It's bad. And whatever you want to believe in the whole climate, the facts of the fact we have less water in this region, bare minimum. So we got to deal with that.
Let's stick with energy for just a second, clean energy and the TikTok that went viral, this trucking company in the valley who were trying to go through proper channels they're the only electrified semi-truck company in the province, maybe even in the country. I can't remember now, but I was watching the video when it dropped, gobsmacked at the fact that this NMP not only writes grants for companies, but then decides who gets the grants. Like, what? Can you lay out what we learned here from this viral TikTok video and then the reaction from the government?
Oh yeah, and you brought it to my attention on Twitter. I mean, it's just I just can't imagine. Imagine if the BC United had done this, the NDP. They seem to be just totally not really acknowledging how big this is. This is basically, and something happened federally too, with that whole app thing, and there's an employee, and why is this happening in government? Why are there no check? I thought there were checks and balances for this kind of stuff. This kind of, I'm not, we got to be careful what we say, because, we're still learning about what's happened, but basically what you just described seems completely backwards and wrong. And you have a company, this whistleblower, this guy who decided to come out and say, I totally should have qualified for this money. And I'm a local business trying to do something environmentally conscious. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get this money. Why? And it turns out there's a whole bunch of reasons. And we'll check out the story if you haven't seen it. So I just think that this is and I put this on our list of things to do. Eby should have called the election a couple of years as soon as he got the leadership, because everything's one after another. This is what happens when you start 7 years in government now. You start getting a bit, I don't know if it's lazy, or you start missing things, or people start finding out stuff, and this is when, 7 to 10 years is kind of the lifespan of a government before they fall. That's very unusual for them to last much longer than that. You're seeing the same with Trudeau, who was elected in 2015. The chances of him winning again, pretty slim. You have a life cycle, and but the only best news for NDP is there's a split opposition. So that's the only reason they probably might win the next election.
So, there's so many ways we could go with that. There's so much meat on that bone that you just said. Is it that there's this movement of coming after this government because it has been so popular up until a year ago? The polling, if you're going to believe the polling, showed one thing. The surging conservative movement in Canada writ large is part of it. But also what I found interesting here is on some of these reactions or announcements that we're seeing, the blame continues to be pointing to the former BC Liberals, now BC United. And it's harder to do that when you've been in power for 7 years. Like,
yeah.
It's kind of like municipal politics when Ken Sim says, we got the house and the roof is not just leaking, it's completely busted and we need to rebuild. Like, but you can say that in that first painful bit, but and when we're talking about budgets of 8 billion, and I know it's general versus whatever revenue, whatever budgets, but when the whole budget for the province is $8 billion, and at one point we were talking about a museum for $1 billion, it was like, you lose. And that's not even an Eby government. That was the Horgan government, the exiting John Horgan. So it's getting noisy, George. I guess that's my point, is that it's getting so noisy that then you lob in the SPS thing with Brenda Locke.
Yeah.
And it's even noisier. And you need Surrey to win this province.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this, and I've always thought there's something else going on here. I mean, she's basically holding them she knows the math. And so she wants 500 million, and that's what she says the difference is between having RCMP and the local police force, the SPS, so Surrey Police Services. So 500, she's getting offered 250. It was 50, then it's 250.
It was 170, then it was 170, 210, 250.
I know. So she is the best thing the opposition has right now, because without those number of seats in Surrey, and
what is it, 9?
Yeah, and it bleeds in Langley. If you live out there, if you live in Langley, Surrey, you're all kind of thinking the same thing. You're looking at anywhere there's an NDP seat on that side of the Fraser, are going, what is going on here with this NDP government? Because they do flip back and forth, and they make decisions based on policy. They chose the NDP because of a toll over a bridge. That's how they won that election and got a minority government in the first place. So they're vulnerable on that. The only reason, as I said, is because we have a split opposition. If those guys can get their act together, they could win it. But it's death by a thousand cuts, right, in politics. And it's not like, were they not screwing up before? Were we not noticing it? Or is it just laziness? Or what is the things that make these governments slowly just fall apart? It seems to be the case. We're seeing it federally. Trudeau yesterday speaking, basically denying that China had any influence over the election. And we're like, whoa, buddy, I don't think you're in tune with what's going on in our country and the way people feel about, this interference. I mean, once you lose touch with your electorate, the way you respond, so the NDP's response to most things right now comes across as quite arrogant. And I saw the same thing with Vision in Vancouver. Once you see that thing where people are going, wait a minute, why aren't you answering this question? As you said, it's spin. Like, why don't just answer the question? Why are you spinning me in circles here? It's a pretty big deal. There's several things happening right now in the provincial government, and they don't seem to be giving much respect to it and to us, the electorate.
And there, as you said, there are many of them right now, right? Like there's multiple fronts or multiple cuts that, there are wins for sure. And I think
the one win is the housing file, which they're getting rid of public hearings. I don't know if that's going to winner. It's going to build housing, but I think a lot of communities are pretty pissed off about it. And if you piss off the mayors and the councillors, I mean, Vancouver seems fine with it. They're like, oh yeah, get rid of public hearings, fantastic. But I think other cities are going, wait a minute. And certainly residents are starting to ask the question, well, wait a minute, who's in control here? Do I not have any say of my neighborhood anymore? So you can put up a tower anywhere you want because the province says you can? Hold on. I mean, you and I talk a lot about tower developments, but I've always said, and we agree, that there has to be a process.
Yeah.
Now, the process can be overbearing and like people can be the whole NIMBY thing at some point. Okay, you got to make a decision. But
when you're arguing over the seniors housing on 41st okay.
You've gone too far.
Yeah.
But they're loud and they vote. And
for sure.
So,
I was going to say the win for me, and I'm looking for similar on the harassment lane for sure, but I think BC is leading the way when it comes to sextortion and protecting kids. And we just saw the news today that Meta's actually taking a step to, as a social media platform, to address sextortion that targets kids and teens. We can take a direct line back to Amanda Todd here in BC. So, there are some wins that are significant. And then there are the other things like this trucker in Chilliwack who literally has a photo of him standing in the transportation minister's office and referencing this grant that he was trying to get. And then the transportation minister is like, yeah, no, we never talked about that. And he's like, yes, we did. Like, it's like, okay, come on. Like those leave a really bad taste in the mouth of, like, it's like, yes. And with the good news, like we should be, when we have Adrian Dix was speaking today about making a better connection between a citizen and a GP, right? Like this medical announcement. I don't know if you were in meetings this morning or not when that was announced, and it feels like a re-announcement unless we start hearing meaningful stories of people finding GPs, like finding a doctor to help them when they're in crisis, help us when we're in crisis. I found myself in that crisis situation. It is unbelievably stressful to not know where to go to fill your prescription. Like you're going to have to go to emergency. Like that's why the emergency rooms, like there's tangible things like using drugs in St. Paul's Hospital, this leaked memo from Northern BC that then you find out that it's actually happening right here in downtown Vancouver. And
That's crazy. You can't go into people's things. They're doing drugs in the hospital. And what is going on? Who's in charge here? Like, what's happening on our streets, in our hospitals, in our institutions? It's a failure on every level for many years, but certainly over these decisions over the last couple of years related to drug addiction and drug use
and decriminalization and the unintended effects of, and I get that we're trying to, as a society, we're trying to halt the horrifying numbers of people dying from the tainted drug supply. Like I get that. Like it's
more drugs. Is that the plan? I don't understand.
See, but that's just it. I don't know. And when people much smarter than I said that's at least somewhere to start, and then we start seeing the trickle down of that, because now, as we've talked about, you can take your injectable or your methamphetamine to smoke or whatever and hang out just about anywhere, including a hospital room, You and I could be in a ward in a hospital and the person next to me could be fighting with their drug dealer, but you cannot consume a beer
No.
at the beach. Like, it's like,
Or in your hospital bed.
right? Right.
Bring a six pack. Hey, buddies. No, you can't do that. You can't do that.
It's just, I mean, okay. And then we've got the new bubble for protesting around schools. This is another thing that I'm like, okay, well, that's something, because this was brought on by the Soji protests that were coming closer and closer to the doors of the schools and putting kids at risk. So there's now a 20-meter bubble around schools in BC where you can't protest within that. It's like, well, how did we get here? And that's what it comes back to the government, right? Like, how did we?
But then I go to the park where my kids went to school, and there's people sitting on the slide doing, crack cocaine. I mean, okay, great, in the playground, or there's dogs without leashes in the kids' playground. You're like, come on, are we getting fights with parents about people with their dogs? And you're a dog person, but sometimes dog people can be like, use your logic. This is a playground. There are kids.
I would not let my dogs, and they're great with kids, but I would not let my dogs run free in a playground, not just because of kids' safety, but because I don't want my dog defecating in a playground and then kids running through it. Like,
exactly. Thank you. So these are things like, who's in charge, who's controlling this stuff. I'm not asking for a police state, but come on, it seems like common sense is out the window, and we're letting it go further out the window, and we're not doing. I talk a lot about this about civil society. This is what this is what the whole, why legal things matter. This is the whole debate, and I was listening to a former justice in the U.S. Who retired, didn't die in office as the Supreme Court justice, and he was talking about that civil society and laws and how it's really important. He talked about decision making at the Supreme Court. There is the facts of law. I think there's there's this whole theory of you can just read the law and you don't have any
apply it,
or you read the law and you think about society and where we live now and how things apply, and you make your decision like that, and you discuss it and it seems like this new movement at the justice level is to take this very strict decision making or this thing that was written 200 years ago in the United States. I think that we're looking at things the wrong way, and we're kind of letting one thing kind of go super loose and being strict about other stuff. It's like, I think that in the whole legal system in the States and in Canada, we're safer, but then you look at our policing system, you look at the things in drug use, you look at us, where it's become so political, decision making on when it comes to policing. And I don't mean police officers, policing and governing, and I don't mean being a government, and it's like
protecting.
We have these rules
protecting
that we follow, and even as parents, I get crazy when I see some parents. Why are parents not doing the proper things for their kids, teaching them good manners, things like that? Oh, now it's like old rant. The yell the clouds.
I know,
but it's true.
Old man screaming it with fist.
But you see some parents like teach your knife and fork are supposed to go this way. These are things that are kind of being thrown out the window. Watch TV, have dinner, come on, sit at the table, have a conversation with your kids. This is where it starts.
Yeah,
anyways.
It is. I like it. I do. Had reason to drive through Stanley Park this weekend.
Oh yeah.
And it's stunning.
Bad.
It's stunning to see all of those stumps. I'm a tree person, I am. All of my art are trees. It's the looper moth infestation, the lack of upkeep. I don't even know who to blame. It's too late for the blame game, but Stanley Park needs to be.
Well, we're starting to get these reports of the actual numbers and things like that. I don't know how much revenue they're making off these trees, if they're making any, but you'd think they would make quite a lot. But unless they're completely dead, there's good money in lumber. I don't know.
There's good money in dead lumber. The Asian gypsy moth lumber furniture is 10 times more expensive than regular furniture.
Yeah, so I'm surprised most people who clear cut their property make money. So as the park board with their continued incompetence, I'm sure they'll find a way to lose money on something like this, because that's the way they like to do things.
But it's shocking.
I know. You drive down, if for those people who don't live in Vancouver, if you're driving down, for example, heading towards the Lions Gate Bridge, you're driving down that road, and before you felt like it was dense forest on both sides. Not anymore. It's quite bare when you drive down there now.
And stumps, stumps cut, 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 cut. But in, listening to experts in the field, not the park board, but the actual scientists who said, on a multiple fronts. Number one, it's the looper moths, the infestation. They come to life in late spring, so you got to get as much out of there as possible, or it just continues and grows, and then we lose the whole park. Yeah, so that's concern number one. But also the dead trees, like the flying over on Harbor Air last fall was really shocking to see the number of dead trees from above. And they were saying that, one windstorm and trees start toppling onto people and cars, and that's
and knocking down other trees that are healthy, right?
For sure. And fire hazard, because they're dead. Can you imagine? No, I don't want to imagine that. So there are people that are fighting against it. Of course there are. And there are people that are trying to just get it done. And hopefully Mother Nature takes care of herself. You mentioned going up to Merritt and driving over the Coquihalla where the fires were a couple of years ago, literally drove through those fires at the time. And it was stunning, shocking, horrible. And then, the next year you're like, wow, Mother Nature really knows how to kind of come back. And it's going to take a long time, and probably, the better part of a generation for it to come all the way back. But,
I think that we do live in a rainforest, but we don't live in a snow forest anymore. And that's more back to the beginning of our conversation, that I think that we will still see lots of trees grow, but because of the rain, that's where you see growth. But we definitely are challenged by all of these things happening, and certainly the looper moth is related to climate change and what's happening in our environment, and all these things are. I was watching listening to an audio. I think it was the New York Times, and they were talking about this new thing where they can create rain, right? So you can, out in the middle of the ocean, they can create this. They get this whole system, put a giant, ship out there with make rain, make clouds.
Really?
Feed the clouds. They've perfected it. The problem is, and it works. The problem is they don't know what that actually. It might solve the problem there, wherever that place might be. One example, they were talking about the coral reef in Australia, and the fact that it's getting whiter and whiter, and it's starting to deteriorate. So they need more rain above it, more clouds,
bleaching.
But they don't know. They can't create the scenario of what happens then if they do this 1,000 kilometers away and somewhere else. Like what's the repercussions of doing what we need to do to make the world more moist, because it'll change. Because as we know, it's changing the way wind blows, and all these things. So if you start interrupting that with your own system, try and solve that problem, you may create 10 other problems. When people think, oh, well, humans will find a solution for this, it's not that easy, because it's like, we talk a lot about whack-a-mole in this.
Yeah, we do.
Solve problem here, boop, pops another problem over here.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting that the science is finding solutions for this, but the solutions also are causing other problems. So,
and you know what, we could, if we're going to title this edition of UnSpun podcast, we can call it Unintended Consequences, right?
That's right.
Because, everybody is moving forward with the best of intentions on just about every subject we've covered today. There's always just the best of intentions. And then
the water. Yep.
It's, you think you're doing the right thing by X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't. I've got one piece of kind of good news, I guess.
Okay, I was going to say, can we end this something on a high note?
Yeah.
I feel like it's depressed.
Did you see the note that went out yesterday? I think it was a Daily Hive story. It was a tweet that I saw that apparently the Showboat and Kits Pool are going to open on time.
A lot. Don't tease.
That's what it said.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I believe it.
How?
When you
I
send
thought
me a photo of you and your kid out there at the pool having a good time.
I can't get in, George. I can't get in. So that's my call out. That's my ask right now on UnSpun podcast. My ask is that when we do open Kits Pool on May long weekend, and it's still going to need some repairs while it's open, fine. Can we stop with the online booking system, please?
Just let people
open the gates, let people in. Let me get my season's pass and come and swim a mile every day whenever it's convenient for me. Because I don't know what time I can.
Another natural way it works, people go there, they swim, they leave.
Yeah.
Scheduling
that's what I do.
Force people to stay. then you don't have that natural ebb and flow of people enjoying this pool. It's weird, this whole booking system. It doesn't work, clearly.
I'm mad at it on behalf of those who don't have access to even the understanding of it. My grandmother used to love swimming in kids' pool. There's no way she'd figure out how to book online. It's just no way. But she would go there and put on her little cap and swim and swim and swim, and then get out, wrap herself in her towel.
I want to see you in that cap. Let's get you in that.
I'm total swim cap and goggles girl. You would laugh at
Are
me.
you?
I got the ugliest Speedo.
The ones with the little flowers on it?
I had one of those, but it doesn't hold my hair in enough. I'm like full swim, like cap that they
Really?
use in the
wow.
Olympics. Oh yeah.
Serious
Yeah. No,
business.
I'm a swim. Well, I've always been a swimmer. I haven't been able to be one for about 4 years. That's why I took up Pilates.
And
Because I'm like,
I love that video of that Pilates video. I think you
wasn't
had
that funny?
sent it to me, or I don't know if you shared it.
Yes, I did. I did. The SNL skit. Oh
Yeah,
my
that
God.
one.
I got that so many times because I've been saying to everybody who'll listen that I love this.
I know. It was so
And
fun.
SNL. And then I'm like, that's not at all like my Pilates studio that I go to. It's all zen and stretchy and whatever. And then my girlfriend Alyssa invited me to her Pilates studio, and I actually went yesterday, and it was exactly like the SNL skit.
Torture.
Oh my God. Timed. Fat. I'm like, oh my God, it's CrossFit. What have I done? Anyway, just find the thing you enjoy and make sure you move your body. Oh my goodness. Oh my
Exactly.
goodness.
Exactly.
Jesus.
All right. That's it, right? Oh my God.
Good times, my friend. Where are we? Okay, we're finding you on social media. We talked a lot about Twitter here. You are at George
_.
Affleck, at George_Affleck. I'm at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on the Twitter and the Instagram. And you're super funny on the TikTok with your curved communications.
Yes.
Very good.
Well, it's George Affleck, but it's their build marketing. So if you want to learn about marketing, go to TikTok.
There you go. Brought to you by Curved Communications, UnSpun podcast. There you go. We're sold.
Sold.
All right.
Bye.
Peace out.